Finally, we have Dr. Nilanjan Raghunath on keeping students motivated in times of crisis, a deep think of remote learning in the social sciences. Um, Nilanjan is an assistant professor of sociology. She teaches digital sociology, gender, sexuality, and society, shaping futures and sociology of social networks and social capital. She won the SUTD Teaching Excellence Award, and she has a teaching certificate from Harvard Derek Borg Center and is a AHE Fellow. This presentation captures the challenges and victories of staying active during remote learning. Over to Dr. Nalina.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone see me and hear me?
Yes.
So hello, everybody, and I'm very thankful to be here today to share my experience of not only teaching a class partly online because, the pandemic and circuit breaker sort of started, towards the latter part of my course. Also because I wanted to try out online learning myself. So during the circuit breaker period, I took a couple of online courses myself in order to feel what it was like as a student of an online course and to see what challenges I faced. Because I thought that would actually give me a better idea or what Max Weber, a famous sociologist, calls as Verstehen, to put myself in the student's shoes. So what I'll be sharing with you today will be it's more qualitative. It's like a deep think of a lot of the literature I've read and some of the early studies, that came out during the pandemic. Now, we all know that online learning is not new. So I just want to, reiterate that because, there have been MOOCs and, all kinds of online courses and people have used, various online formats, for the last few years. It's just that during the pandemic, it was an emergency that people had to suddenly go fully online. And in some of the more discussion-based classes or even in the lab-based classes, there were many, many challenges partially because a lot of schools, had to very, very quickly adapt. So a lot of studies are being done, and I wanted to share one that was done in the United States. In a sense, some of the faculty mentioned that they had to change some of the kinds of assignments and exams that they were asking students to do. They had to somewhat lower their expectations to some extent, at least in the initial stages before they could adapt. And some institutions allowed students to choose a pass-fail grade. Some people drop some of their assignments, lower their quality of work, etc., or even drop the readings. I just want to add that honestly, it doesn't have to be such a big shock, even though I do understand that a lot of these are big challenges that many teachers have been facing globally. And of course, we're lucky that I think in Singapore, I think our students are very, very tech savvy, at least, at the university level. And most of them had, or in fact, all of them had digital access. So that made it easy because digital access is a very important challenge to overcome, especially during such a time. But some of the challenges I find, in a sense, were, I've broken it down to these. I'm sure there are many more. Is one thing is building remote rapport. And I want to talk about rapport and communication as a very essential tool, not just for online learning, but also for offline learning. But online learning made me realize how much rapport was important. And then, of course, promoting active learning. Now, while our students are very, very tech savvy, I mean, they're happy doing many things online, but they do report, sometimes things like fatigue because, they have to do so many things online. And in general, the pandemic caused them a lot of emotional stress because they have to be at home a lot. And of course, keeping students motivated, is a continuous challenge, I think, in any kind of course format. Then, of course, there are assessments, and then and the idea that online learning itself and blended learning of any kind is constantly evolving. So the tools that we use today may not be the same, that we use after a while. So building remote rapport. So rapport is one of the fundamentals of good teaching. And I particularly learned this at the Derek Bach Center when I was, doing their course, that, how much faculty all around the world are concerned with rapport. Now we assume oftentimes that, as faculty members, we are good communicators, right? Because that's what we do for a living, right? We talk to people, we communicate with people through various means, be it through slides, through videos, etc. But I just realized how much about rapport that I cannot really take for granted. I mean, in a sense, so much about teaching is about effective faculty-student communication, right? So it's not just that the subject matter is excellent, which it is, because teachers put a lot of effort into the subject matter, but also because as faculty members, we have to communicate to various audiences, and audiences sometimes come in a mixed bag. Sometimes students come, in a mixed bag, maybe they're from different levels, different learning styles. And there's so many now pedagogical, psychologists, who talk about simple issues when you prepare your lecture, especially when you're online, is things like, for example, eye contact. Like eye contact is not something, I would really worry about, during, say, a Zoom lecture, but after reading a lot of materials, I realized how important it is, to have eye contact with the students. And sometimes, to build rapport in a class, I would actually speak to students individually on Zoom, so that I actually get to know them and try and understand what their learning styles are. And then of course, maintaining eye contact, during a Zoom lecture. So in a sense, it's like how newsreaders on news, they just do a fantastic job in keeping your attention. I realized that so much of this was about, how I present myself to students, particularly because, they're kind of watching me, right? What helped me was also short introductory activities before a start of a lecture, just to gain their attention a little bit, maybe a quick quiz or, a poll that you can do on Zoom, something to get them started. And thirdly, sharing stories. I realized how much students liked it when I shared stories and it captured their attention because, it's got to be short. It cannot be like super long, keep it short and sweet, but sharing stories that actually connect the more serious delivery of materials to something slightly more anecdotal that, you can keep them engaged. And the other thing is, of course, non-judgmental and non-personal feedback. I found was very, very important because, they're naturally confused because suddenly like things are going online and then they don't know how they're going to be judged. For example, how is class participation going to be judged, when you're online? So I had to switch to lots of different kinds of non-judgmental. Now, when I say non-judgmental, it means, of course, it's constructive, right? It's constructive feedback that's not necessarily directed to a person, such as, saying that you did this, poorly, but rather, how can this be done better? So in a sense, using words that are very supportive in the feedback and giving them avenues to sort of respond to that feedback. And of course, sometimes giving feedback to the group instead of just individuals. And of course, putting ourselves in the students' shoes is so very important, because I had to spend a lot of time understanding their learning styles. Now, of course, I mean, I assumed, and it was mostly true, that, you know, all students love online learning, but several of them, you know, got back to me and said, you know, they really miss face-to-face interaction. So obviously you have to take care of that, you know, and explain to that effect as to, you know, what's possible and not possible, you know, in the online realm. So in a sense, you know, I find this quote very interesting. You don't just teach a class, you inspire and teach an individual student. And I realized so much of this was important, especially when, you know, there is no physical contact, that, you know, you have to inspire students. This is possible, of course, in many ways. One-on-one interaction is a very important factor, you know, like having consultations with them on Zoom, breaking them up into smaller groups, and also using the discussion forum on eDimension, where you respond to what they say, or even the chat function on Zoom, you know, helps with a lot of these things. Of course, I just want to reiterate that this doesn't completely replace you know, face-to-face teaching. It's just that we have to make do whatever best, you know, we can do. So promoting active learning, now this is always a challenge. I think even in the regular classroom, especially in sociology or other kinds of social science classes, where it's pretty reading heavy, you know, you have to motivate them to actually read the articles in the first place, you know, and get them to do presentations, make sure that they're actually asking sort of higher order critical thinking kinds of questions. And of course, encourage students to do peer learning and learn from each other as well. So I found that, and of course, other teachers may have their own experiences with this, I found that using Zoom and the discussion forum helped with this, because if I just relied on Zoom, you know, it wasn't enough. In a sense, I had to, you know, put them on the eDimension forum and say, okay, fine, here's a topic, here's a debate. Now, you know, go and argue about this, you know, go and find evidence and post evidence on this. And then, of course, get them to do mini debates. So it was good in a sense of mixing and matching things. I had to try different things out. The other ways, of course, you know, they can present on Zoom themselves, and they can present ideas. Sometimes, you know, they took turns in presenting, say, part of a class or part of an idea or part of a concept, because then at least they have some live engagement in a sense. And they use the drawing function and other functions on Zoom to actually illustrate an idea or a concept. Quizzes and polls became very important because, again, you know, it's about capturing their attention in various ways. And then, of course, the frequent use of the whiteboard. So what I found was, you know, spending too much time on any one format, you know, was not exciting enough. You know, to make it exciting, it had to be a mix and match of these things, depending on whether you're doing a recitation session or a lecture. So the other thing is student fatigue. Students were experiencing fatigue for various reasons, and I think it was just the whole pandemic issue in general. So frequent consultations, I think, just to keep them going, keep them motivated. Mix and match content delivery, I talked about that earlier. And when I took online courses, you know, I was trying to see, okay, what keeps me from not getting bored online? And I realized the format really matters, right? How is the content presented? And, you know, having sort of a nice menu format, you know, on your eDimension page as well, whereby you organize videos, you've organized quizzes, and things that they can go to easily and do it, you know, click, click, click at their own time, either synchronous or asynchronous, seems to work well. Then of course, constant feedback. People are more likely to do something when they expect that they will be successful at it and when they value the activity. So students have to value the activity. So, preparation is key. And of course, setting clear goals. Sometimes students just don't see the purpose of a lesson in the online format. So I try to do the LO and MO for each lesson so that they get, they go back to, okay, why am I actually doing this? Like, what's the purpose of this? So bring them back on track. Assessments, I had to change the frequency of the formal and informal. Good to add informal assignments that, they don't feel as, threatened about, what grades they're going to get. And if they're fine with the informal, then of course that help with the formal as well. Variety, many kinds of assessments. I mean, I usually do research papers and essays in my class. I don't have exams, so I don't have any issues with exams, but I made it sort of, shorter, but, more of them. And then expectations, we have to be very, very clear, a good summary and justification as to why they're doing what they're doing. And of course, feedback has to be qualitative and quantitative. So the tools keep changing. And, this is of course a challenge for any instructor, keeping abreast with all the different updates and all the different, the Kahoots and everything that we can use. I suggest, based on my own research, is sticking to, 2 or 3 platforms and then evolving with those platforms. And also, updating your content and ask students to co-create content like wiki and videos that they can post as well, because that keeps them engaged. And of course, conclusion, I think online learning is here to stay. I think we all, are aware of this. In a sense, we have to kind of streamline it because the online world will not streamline it for us. We need to streamline it. And one example that I recommend everybody to have a look at is the Get Smarter website, because they're very well organized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nina. So, we have some time, so probably we invite all the speakers to take some questions. So the participants can unmute yourself and ask any questions if you want. In the chat, there were some good questions. Any burning questions? I think Dr. Ninanjan had a question for Alliston, which I think he has answered. She was asking whether if teaching will work for sociology. We use theory, but these are not necessarily true and false statement or pure logic.
Yes, so as I said, it'll work for anything, any argumentative writing, but it won't work for kind of descriptive writing or kind of prescriptive stuff. There has to be some kind of logical argument involved in order to map it. And so if the writing is argumentative, even if it's sociological, then it can be, teaching can be used for it, definitely.
Okay. Maybe if the faculties, if you have any other additional information that you missed out in your presentation that you would like to share, I think we have about another 10 minutes. So, because our break starts at 4:30, because we skipped one break session, so we have a bit of time.
Teacher Yakinong here. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
It's for Bina. Bina, thanks for giving the very interesting talk. I'm just wondering, how do you perform assessment, for those module or play you just mentioned? I mean, it can be fun, uh, how to assess the rigor, the depth of the understanding. Could you share?
Yes, thank you, Kim Yong. Something that Nina said that actually I also follow is having a variety of assessment, right? So I found that having a variety was useful, especially when it is remote. And so I had two continuous assessments. The first one was the oral synchronous Viva session. The second one was the take-home assignment, which is, well, actually the play test is also an assessment, the videos that I shared, and then they submitted a report that I had specific rubrics for, that I can share later. And I also had a take-home, we didn't have a final exam, but we had a take-home assignment where they were asked to design a solution using principles that were taught in class. So they have to quote, the week, the person who said it, because we had quite a number of guest speakers who came up with who introduced a lot of different frameworks and pedagogies. And so they had to make reference to these people and what these frameworks and pedagogies are in their answer as well. And so that's how they actually got points. And I always made these rubrics clear, in every assessment. I also have a final report component, which is a group work. So the majority is still individual, except for the final report, which is a collaborative one, which consisted of a presentation and a final report, where they were attached to clinicians who have come up with new games, right? So they are like an alpha version of testing of their games that they just came up with from SingHealth. So the students actually were attached to them, and then they had to come up with their own survey questions, and they validated these games. So, and again, we had a strict rubrics for that. So there was assessment all throughout, and definitely it is rigorous. But this batch of students were very motivated. I had some students who, it was hard for me to choose the top few because they were really very motivated during this period. Yeah.
So are you able to differentiate this, say, sometimes called A grader, B grader, C grader, from these rubrics that you just submitted?
The A graders were a little bit tough because there were quite a few of them. So I really had to, things like the oral, the Viva session, definitely that allows me to differentiate between them. The group work is always a little bit more tricky because it's not clear which person is actually, unless you do a peer evaluation. But otherwise, I have weekly homework that is cannot be cut and paste. So it's all writing. In fact, it's a little bit like humanities in the sense that it's a reflection of the chapters of the book. That is, they have to do some book review, and so there's no answer out there, and so that's really them writing. And so all this writing on a weekly basis, help me to differentiate between the different grades. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Victoria, can I ask one more question? Maybe Alastair, is it okay?
Yes, we do have time. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. I'm just wondering, with Dichin, are you still able to assess the rigor and the depth of the reasoning skill of student? Because somehow the software is so smart, able to dissect like what you guys just presented for the student. But are we losing some, maybe the very important part, the part where they have to extract very conceptual, or key concept or something that very abstracts from the reading material?
That's a very good question. Yeah. I would say that Digim, all it does is it simplifies and formalizes that traditional process. And so in a way, it doesn't displace the traditional way of having to read complex writing and isolate arguments. All it does is it acts as a kind of, for learners of that skill, it acts as a kind of support by presenting them with a framework that they have to operate within. So I would say that long term, this is why I was kind of framing it mainly towards first year students, because I think by the time students get to third year, they should be able to do this probably without Digim. But for first years, I think it's useful because they don't have any there isn't really any supportive kind of material out there to teach them how they can perhaps do this. So having some form of application which says, you need to enter in these propositions, you need to connect them logically, certainly is a useful thing from the humanities perspective. And I think it's kind of better than the kind of what we use now, which is kind of like mind maps and things like that. The other side of things, which I think is where teaching may be still useful for like researchers and people later on in their SUTD careers, is that it enables us to handle logical relationships between propositions on a large scale. So sometimes I can be reading a book, but I may have forgotten which book I read 10 minutes ago, a long time ago. But with Teaching, you can kind of keep all of your thoughts in one place. So that may be an application for higher level learners. Yeah.
I'm not too sure the inventor is Guan Liang is still around, but I'm just thinking, can we do the reverse process? Asking the teaching to write a very abstract, article.
Yeah, I know that would require. I think if you need some expert in machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think, to collaborate and say, if you give them these propositions, can it derive an essay? Probably you could get someone to do that.
Okay.
That's a good idea for a project for our students. I might ask them to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe see whether there's a reverse process to see how things work, right? I mean, I leave it to you guys to think about that. Yeah, it'd be quite interesting to try.
That would be great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Vijay, if you don't mind saying so quiet, can I ask maybe Xiao Jian a questions?
Yes, please. I was
Xiao Jian and
about
William,
to ask them to share one last thought each before we end the session. Yeah, go ahead.
I think this design ideation challenge is a very good exercise. I'm just thinking aloud, I think you guys got a chance to talk to Ruth in UK. She has been actually pushing me, see whether we can come out innovative online projects, pedagogy. I'm just thinking aloud from this ideation challenge. Can we go further down the road to think about how to actually execute this is the selected idea, by the student? How can we do even digital prototyping or digital twin simulation or even physical prototyping? Can we take on this further using an online platform or maybe a hybrid platform? Try to overcome in terms of space, in terms of resources, even in terms of time zone. Can we share some thought along this line?
All right, so thanks for your question. So I think early on in our discussions, we did bounce the word hackathon around significantly. And at the end of the day, we chose to at least organize an ideation challenge, which to us is kind of like the first half of a hackathon, whereby the groups come together and they ideate and they come up with a bunch of solutions. So now the second half, as you rightly mentioned, it's a bit challenging because of the fact that we were all kind of in our own homes, unable to come together to prototype. So I think that the idea to actually either do some sort of a digital follow-up, a digital prototyping session, or a follow-up event is a really good one. So it's something that we also actually reached out to the Entrepreneurship Center, and we talked to them about the possibility of following up maybe a month later, somewhere down the line, maybe selecting the solutions that had a lot of potential. And again, in terms of potential, the market potential, so on and so forth. And they could actually continue on in a part 2 event, which would conclude in some sort of a prototype being made. And then it's definitely something we want to look into. But again, this is the first run, so we were quite limited in terms of the amount of time that we had to launch this event. And again, we have had quite good support from, say, Noam Kwong and all that from Entrepreneurship Center. So I think in subsequent runs, it's something we're interested in doing, to actually expanding it beyond just the ideation phase. That's one. And two, I think to actually include a larger group of students so that we, and maybe even healthcare partners, so not just limited to Changi Hospital, but to actually look at a bigger range of challenges.
So I was just thinking a lot is to integrate this into our undergraduate program, 1D, 2D, or even 3D, going through the process of ideation. I think is first part, right? Try to discover, then define, develop, and maybe implement. Just going through this is really an online platform. So what I'm thinking about is that maybe this ideation, like what you just done, could be first week of a course or second week of a course. Then after that, pick the right idea by a few group of students and go through maybe even just restrict them to online. Could be hybrid. I leave it to you guys. Then if this can be done, I think in future it could be a hallmark for SUTD as well. Meaning I'm trying to develop an online project, learning the kind of pedagogy. So there could be a systematic way to encourage students, how to actually go beyond boundary in terms of doing this together. Could be regardless of place and time. Could be maybe student between SUTD and Alto, for instance, or even elsewhere. Just something that allow us to think along, rather than we just go through a standard hackathon, then from there, make a prototype. But I think there are a lot of opportunity we can explore further down the road to support the new initiative on the cyber physical education. Just some thought I have in mind. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Xiaojun.
Just to add on a little bit, I would think that to tackle the issue of different time frame, one possibility is to use other digital tools like Microsoft Suite and all that to capture some of the stimulations and also some of the videos of what the student groups have done, so that would allow the replay of what I've presented at different time. So then that could be one of the ways to tackle in terms of the differences in timing. Of course, when it comes to the discussion between the teams, right, or amongst the teams, that's really a great challenge. And for that, I guess we still have to find certain time that is conducive for them to meet up. That could be tackled to perhaps grouping, and also perhaps to their different times of meet up with their mentors. Let's say, for example, if there's a mentor assigned to them. So that could be in terms of programming wise areas to look at. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that William?
Yes.
Thanks, William, for the comment. Yeah. Vijaya, back to you. Sorry, I'm done with my question.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for the wonderful.
Sorry, can I add
Yes.
a last bit on this part, especially on what Prof. Bay have mentioned. Just to roughly introduce myself, I'm Jacob. I am one of the pioneers in SUTD. I've also previously been working with some of the pedagogy within the school in the past few years to engage some of the VR and AR stuff. So I've worked with Prof. Dina, I've worked with some of the other people like Prof. Keegan. And if you can read some of the things that have been published in the publication just now mentioned. So with regards to this, for Prof. Ping mentioned, right, I think this is something that we have identified and we are driving towards for the past year or so. We are actually in the process of developing some of these projects. We are developing our own a custom online platform. So it's used in terms of, like, let's say, if you want to use it in terms of a conference, you want to use it in terms of online teaching, it is a flexibility of that. But why we are doing that is not as an aim to compete against the 100 of others that are already out there, because there's a lot of out there. But what we want to do is really a very customized solution with the starting ground of customizing it for SUTD, be it in use for ASD, be it in use of some of the VR focused stuff. So I think we will be, this is something that I'll follow up with Prof. a lot, we're working a lot with him with. So we'll be sharing some of our additional our roadmaps ahead. And if anyone is interested to work with us for more of these kind of projects, be it creating a very custom solution for online collaboration or even like a very experiential sort of VR or AR projects for use in pedagogy, yeah, you can contact us on that.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. Yes, so continue to collaborate and talk with the participants separately. You can drop us a note, and I think Dr. Nacha will follow up with you. Okay, thank you. And let's join back the main session, which is starting in 1 minute about now. Okay, see you all in the other room.